Welcome to the Leadership Levers Podcast. I'm your host, Will Gladhart, CMO at the Culture Think Tank. Our Culture Think Tank community is committed to advancing workplace culture and well-being. We are a virtual hub for authors, investors, leaders, managers, and employees worldwide to connect, engage in candid discussions, share ideas, and explore resources for cultivating a healthy work environment. We're here today to learn about the actions leaders have taken to address cultural change. Our guest today is Cory Scheer, the CEO and founder of Trust-Centric Consulting. Thanks so much for taking time to join us today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be with you.
I thought I would have you share a little bit with our audience about yourself and your background or your particular organization or specialty.
Thank you again. I'm happy to share a bit about myself. I'm the founder and CEO of an organization called Trust-Centric, and we are an organizational and leadership development firm that really zeroes in on helping leaders and teams and organizations measure the current level of trust within their teams and their employees. And then we introduce and train them in a very specific framework and methodology, and then walk alongside them to help them strengthen their current level of trust wherever it's currently at. And we do that through various workshops, speaking engagements, retreats, various things like that. But at the end of the day, our ultimate goal is to help improve workplace culture by really focusing in on the dynamics that occur within organizational trust.
Well, thank you for sharing that. You also have some exciting news to share that on kind of the publishing side of the house. So would you just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you for that. It has been a great couple of weeks and something that it's surreal right now, but we do have good news in that our book, the book that I wrote over the last several months, is now finally published. It's on Amazon, and the book is called Closing the Trust Gap. And give full credit to where credit is due. My wife is the person that actually coined the title for the book, and I'm so thankful for that because it's really resonated with people, and it's invited people into some of the challenges that our data shows is really prevalent across multiple industries. And these gaps in trust that can occur are significant, and they're costly, and they're challenging. And in the book, we try to present it just a framework and a way of some of the things that we do in order to help organizations, and then some of the results that we've been able to see. So, yep, it's on Amazon, Closing the Trust Gap, and it's been really fun to watch people read it and then provide reviews and hopefully take action on really implementing it for their own workplace.
That's really exciting. Well, you definitely sit in a unique area because we always kind of say that trust is key in culture and also communication. But once trust is lost, as you noted, it's very expensive and time consuming to get back in an organization. And that could be at a personal level, that could be at a community level, that could be at an organizational level.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things that I know that you and we've already talked about this before, but very few leaders of organizations are incredibly intentional about actually measuring trust as a standalone KPI. And we both know that it actually can be measured. And when it is measured, it really does have a direct effect. It correlates directly to things like employee retention, employee advocacy, employee satisfaction, employee productivity, and then maybe the less quantitative measure, which is just the overall ethos and quality of the workplace culture. But what would it look like if we were to think about trust as actually a standalone KPI? And we can do that. We can measure the factors that go into that. And as we measure that over the course of time, we're then able to begin to take action on very specific ways to strengthen that, which will then have a significant effect on some of the other key performance indicators that make a workplace healthy.
Cory, we'll be discussing 3 questions today. As a warm-up to our conversation, would you share why you believe a healthy culture is critical?
Well, it's critical on so many levels. Number one, it makes the best business sense to have a strong workplace culture because the data over and over and over shows that when you have trust within an organization, when there is strength within a team, strength from the leader all the way to the frontline employee, and that gap in trust that can naturally occur just due to the hierarchical nature of organizations. But when there is an intentional closing of that gap, it affects these critical indicators that are employee related, like retention, like productivity, but then how that translates to creativity and through innovation and customer service and the delivery of those solutions to your customers, it has a direct effect on those as well. And so it doesn't just make sense internally for the organization, it makes sense externally for the customer experience as well. And we all know that when you have an incredible customer experience, that's going to increase the value of the services that you provide and also the loyalty of those customers and their willingness to refer you to other soon-to-be customers. And so that sequence of events moving from the inside of the organization and the health to then the external, the customer experience, it is all founded upon this relational dynamic that is called trust.
I love that you tie not only the internal, the bottom line financials, the experience within the organization to the outside, because one dynamically impacts the other. So what do you see as the biggest challenge leaders face when addressing cultural change within an organization? Or, what have you specifically faced in your own organization?
Well, the data shows us that because we introduce a framework that we call the structure of trust, and there are 3 building blocks in the structure of trust. The first one is competency, whether technical or communication or leadership or project management or financial competency. The second building block is problem solving. So not only the process of solving problems, but also the ability to identify the correct problems to solve. And then the third vital building block that the research shows has to do with demonstrating care for other people within the organization. And that is, from what our research shows and from our client experiences, the care for others building block is traditionally the lowest ranking of the 3 building blocks. And so then the next question is, what is the number one way in order to strengthen that building block of caring for others with trust? And our research shows that by 6 percentage points more than any other way to improve that building block, the number one way to do that is through listening actively, through taking time, through getting feedback that is actionable, and then doing something with that and ensuring that the communication is ongoing, that it's iterative, that it's ultimately helpful moving forward. And that response to that communication and those intentional open dialogue feedback loops that are helpful for the organization, interestingly, we have found that is the number one way to strengthen trust in that building block that is traditionally the weakest of the 3.
I really appreciate that you addressed that, because that empathy piece, and many employees simply want to be heard and listened to. Not that necessarily there is a direct action taken, but I think from your research, but also from research on our side of the house, is that next step truly is sharing into the organization what next steps are, what the actual action is, what the intent is, and then continuously following up on that, as you mentioned, in that feedback loop cycle of providing that constant feed to every level of the organization. Because when it stops, well, then nobody knows what's going on. No one's comfortable in their role. They don't know what they're doing, from management up into the C-suite. And, it makes it really, really challenging to kind of readdress that. And, you've probably heard this as well as we have of, oh, well, I'm not a therapist. How do I'm empathetic, but how do I fix this? And, we're not given a roadmap as leaders of how to address that specific challenge.
We're not. And you know better than anyone that if you have solid data, if you have a basis by which you can understand and interpret the current condition of the workplace culture, that becomes both helpful and ultimately hopeful for the organization, because now you're expending energy towards things that it's the truth of what is occurring within the organization. And that's where I kind of delineate in the book the difference between the value proposition, which is taking action on the worth of something, which of course we want to build the value proposition, but there's no way that we can maximize value if we don't have a strong foundation of trust. And so in the book, I introduced this concept of the trust proposition. So different than value proposition, where it's taking action on the worth of something. The trust proposition is about taking action on the truth of something. And when you have data that is sound, that is consistent, and even perhaps longitudinal to show a trend, you are now looking at, and in some cases, facing and grappling with the truth. But as a leader, that is one of the key roles of our responsibility, which is to understand the truth, and then do something with the truth that will ultimately help the long-term outcomes of the organization. But if we are operating in a vacuum and the truth is only the narrative that we are telling ourselves without sound data, then of course we're going to struggle both internally and externally.
You definitely touched on this in what you just mentioned, but what do you think the leaders can do to address the challenges that they are facing, or what have you done to help them?
The key is you have to create some form of an assessment. And that could be through qualitative measures. Maybe you need to kind of wade into some of the feedback loops through just conversations. You may want to go more of an evaluative or a quantitative, or if you're doing something that is currently quantitative, then evaluate, is that effective? Are you doing something with the data? I would say the number one thing that I hear organizations kind of struggle with is, well, we already deploy an employee satisfaction survey every year. So then I have two questions. Number one, how's that working for you? And then number two, what is your response rate? And they typically say, well, it's only 25 to 35%. And we really don't do anything with the data, but this is kind of what we do every year. Well, the reality is that satisfaction is more of a measure of advocacy and loyalty, but maybe a more important measure to look at is further upstream, where you're looking at some of the dynamics of trust that ultimately leads to your satisfaction measures. But employee satisfaction and employee trust are actually two very different metrics. Both are important to look at, but if you're only looking at satisfaction, and even worse, only looking at satisfaction and doing nothing with it, you're missing a huge opportunity to improve the culture within your organization.
It comes up frequently that people are not tired of pressing the button. They're tired of pressing the button and hearing no response, no action from leaders and or anyone in the organization about. It goes back to your point of empathy and being listened and heard to, because they're asked for their opinion. And when they receive no information, well, that's why you get a 25% participation rate. Engagement isn't, like you said, an outcome of something within the organization. When you talk about those pieces around satisfaction, it's how connected to the organization are they? Do they understand their role? Do they trust their manager and their leader to help them understand those roles and be clear about where they sit in the organization? So, I love that you address that, because it's such a critical element, but also you will probably be the one of hundreds of people that, chime in on, oh, hey, we do a satisfaction survey or we do an engagement survey every year, but we do nothing with it. I mean, it's repetitive. I'm just going, well, so there's got to be a better way.
And the good news is, there is.
There are. Excellent. Yeah. So, you've shared a lot of really, really great nuggets around empathy, around trust, around, satisfaction, around taking next steps in an organization. Do you have anything else you'd like to share with leaders that are listening?
My biggest encouragement is, especially for leaders who find themselves in maybe a new season of leadership, where perhaps they're a brand new leader, or they're a leader in a new organization, or maybe their team that they are surrounded with, they are new, or maybe there's even something within the organization that is changing that current reality of fast growth, or maybe there's a stall in growth, or perhaps there's been a merger, an acquisition. Anything that constitutes a new season of leadership, this is the opportunity to seize for a leader to level set on the culture, on the ability to say, let's look at ourselves in the mirror. Let's not do this in a way that is an indictment or a negative, but let's do this in a way that it is generative, it's moving the organization forward, it's honest, and it's helpful, and so that we can begin to take action on what matters most within our organization, which is first ensuring that the people of the organization that are working are flourishing, so that the employees can then share that with the customers, and then the customers are going to have the best possible experience. But my encouragement to every leader, especially leaders in a new season, is to take action, assess, apply a proven framework, create a blueprint, and move the organization forward.
Great advice. So Cory, thank you so much. I've enjoyed having you on as a guest today, and I very much appreciate your insights.
Thank you. Truly my privilege to be with you today.
Thank you for joining us on the Leadership Lovers podcast. You may find all our Leadership Lovers episodes in our Culture Think Tank community at www culturethinktank.ai. Join the community at no charge and tune in weekly as we invite leaders to share their experience in strengthening culture one action at a time.